Hey guys, it's Ginger on Wheels here. I have no idea how to make a brake video exciting, but we're gonna try our best. This is the brake line on my Cabo King GTR. It's definitely broken. It's supposed to be going into the brake lever. So today we're gonna fix that. I'm gonna show you how to bleed the brakes also. Should be a very informative video. Now you might be thinking, oh Ginger, I don't need to do a brake bleed, but if your brake pads are still good and you're not leaking hydraulic fluid that you see, but your brakes are still mushy, or if they touch the bar, then you do need to do a brake bleed. It's the only other way to fix it. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. I would like 50K by Christmas. That'd be a great Christmas present, but it's really up to you. Okay, let's roll the intro and get started fixing the scooter. Okay, so as I showed you earlier, this is the current state of our brake line. This is the end of the hydraulic line. We still have the barbs hanging out of here, and then it's obviously supposed to go in the hole. I don't know what happened. I turned really hard or something snagged the line when I crashed, but it just went boop, popped right out, and this is where we're at. After I crashed, I squeezed the brake lever like a noob, and then all the oil came out. So that means if I were to reattach this brake line right now and just hook it up as is, there's gonna be a bunch of air inside here. And that's no good, no bueno for hydraulic brake lines. So we're gonna be doing a process called bleeding the brakes. It's not violent at all, I promise, YouTube. It's basically just a process where you hook everything up like it's supposed to be and then make sure that there's no air in the lines by pumping hydraulic fluid through it to get all the air out. So instead of just showing you what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna explain how hydraulic brake lines work a little bit, because I think it'll make the repair process easier to understand. So this line right here is essentially a big tube, and the tube is full of hydraulic fluid, AKA mineral oil. There's a caliper at the bottom of the brake line. When you squeeze the brake lever, hydraulic fluid is pushed down through the line, and that's what squeezes your brake pads. So obviously right now, if I were to squeeze the lever, the oil or the mineral oil is just gonna come squirting out right here. So we need to hook this line in here and make sure that the oil goes down this line. The hard part is making sure that this is completely sealed and that when you squeeze the lever, no oil is gonna come out. So there's a little process with 4 or 5 pieces I'm gonna show you on how to hook this back up to this and make sure that it's all oil tight. To make this process easier to see for you and easier to do for me, I'm gonna take all the stuff off of this handlebar. I'm gonna take the grip off, I'm gonna take the throttle off, and we're gonna level out the brake lever. I am using my Allen wrench set that I got from PEVOutlet.com. I really enjoy using these Allen wrenches because you can put them in at an angle with this rounded part on the end of the wrench. And even if you're at an angle, corked, cocky-eyed or whatever, you can turn the screw and you're not gonna strip the threads inside of it. It's very nice. Looks like this handlebar screw is a size 3 metric Allen. The handlebars have this little plastic cap on the end that you gotta pry out there very gently. And I'm gonna use 2 flathead screwdrivers carefully to pry out this little plastic piece. Off to a good start. You gotta drop everything at least once. This is what the plastic cap looks like when you pull it out of the handlebar. And the handlebar grip just pops right off. Next step, throttle. Let's take that off. Throttle is also size 3 screws. I might not take this throttle off. I might just slide it down the bar to get it out of the way. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. Okay, throttle is out of the way. Well, it's not quite out of the way, is it? I'd like to get rid of this zip tie. Let's do that. Okay, zip tie clip tied. And we're gonna disconnect the throttle from its little home right here. Orange plug. Now we can just move that out of the way. So all we're left with now is the brake and the brake line. Let's loosen the brake lever a little bit so that we can make this level. Actually, I do need to take this off. I forgot. Okay, so like I said, when I crashed, I had no idea what really happened, and I squeezed this and all the fluid came dumping out of here. I'm hoping that the one that Voro sent me is already full of fluid, because they sent me a replacement lever right here, and it's got a little nut in here. It's hard to squeeze, so I'm thinking that this is full of fluid already. So I'm gonna swap out the one that I drained with this brand new one. Oh. There's a little bit of mineral oil inside the connectors here. I'm glad I checked. That's a signal wire for the brakes to let the scooter know to cut off power when you hit the brakes and also to turn the brake lights on. Had mineral oil in it. I don't know if that is conductive at all, but certainly not good. Here's the one I'm pulling off. Here's the new one, sliding new one on. Gonna tighten it up a little bit here so that I can mount it to the bars in a level position. Okay, so our brake lever has been replaced. I'm not gonna plug this in just yet. I wanna do the repair first. Okay, so there's 4 pieces we need to do this repair, and the first piece is called the barb, which is actually sticking out of my existing brake line, but a new one looks like this. It's basically a little tube made out of metal with barbs on the end of it, like a fishing hook. And when you stick this down inside the hose for the brake lines, the barb holds this piece inside of there. At the end of the barb is a little tiny hole for your brake fluid to go in and out of. This barb is meant to stick all the way down inside the hose. And as you can see, this one is still mostly in there, but I would like to tap it in a little bit more and get it flush with this brake line right there. I'm not exactly sure how to do this because I've never done it before. So I'm gonna hold this and then try and tap it with a hammer. There we go. Now you can see it's totally flush in the hole. That's what I want to see. So the other 3 pieces required for this repair, this one's called the olive, appropriately named I think, looks like a little baby golden olive. Don't eat it though. This little piece on the end, it's like a protective boot to cover the whole mechanism once we're done. And then this little screw right here that actually holds the brake line into the brake lever, that has a hole in it, I'll call it a barrel nut. Okay, so the order of operations here, we're going to slide the boot on the brake line first, just like that. Then I'm going to slide the nut over the brake line, the barrel nut I was talking about. And then I'm going to put the olive on the very end of the brake line like so. That piece just slides over the tip like that. Okay, so we got the barb down there, we got the olive over the barb, and we got the barrel nut behind it, and then behind all that we have the boot. So now what we're gonna do is take this screw out, click, hopefully we'll push this line into the brake lever and we'll hear it seat itself or click a little bit, and then we can screw this in, and while we're screwing this down, what happens is there's threads inside of here that we're screwing this against, and as we tighten it down more and more and more, it actually pinches this little olive down against the brake line and creates a hydraulically tight seal. So let's test if the theory is correct. Oh, let me get some paper towels from my poor floor before I completely unscrew this. Barb goes into hole first. I think it seats into something inside of there. Let's get this slid back, see if we can seat it in. Okay, push the wire in as far as it would go. I can see the tip of the olive sticking out of there. I'm gonna attempt to screw this into the brake line now, while simultaneously pushing the line in, I think, is the key. Okay, try and dry off the lines a little bit because that's getting hard to grip, hard to work with. I've read online that this mineral oil is slightly corrosive. Okay, so it's screwed in there as hand tight as it'll go. The olive is in there. I'm going to attempt to tighten this again with the channel locks, and we will see if it's tight, hydraulically tight, or if any oil comes squirting out once I squeeze the lever. Okay, moment of truth. I'm gonna squeeze it. Let's see if oil comes out. Please don't. Oh, the brake works though. Okay, so when I pull this, the brake works. I think we're good. I think we're sealed in there. As far as I'm concerned, that's pretty good. Like the next step would just be slide the boot over and call it good. But let's bleed the brakes, fill this back up full of fluid, and then squeeze it again and see if we see any leaks. Okay, so before me here, you'll see all the pieces you need to do this brake bleed on the Zoom brakes. I'll go through them. We have a little bucket here, just looks just like this, and it has an adapter on the bottom of it that screws into our brake lever. It also has this little plug, and the plug goes inside the bucket, and it just looks like that. We also have the T15 Torx wrench right here to undo the screw on the brake caliper. Oh, this little boot piece actually goes on the bottom of the bucket, just like that. We have this piece right here. This is a T25 Torx screw. This is for the brake lever. Mineral oil, we obviously need this. It's gonna fill up the lines. And we need a hose, a syringe, a clamp, and another adapter.
If you've got an electric scooter or even an e-bike with different type of brakes, don't worry because the kit does come with multiple adapters for you to choose from.
And we're gonna put these together. I'll show you real quick. So the hose goes in the crimp like that, and then if you need to, you can squeeze it like that and crimp the hose to stop the flow of fluid. But on the end of the hose, we need a little adapter right here that's gonna screw into the brake caliper. This is a size Torx 15, T15, with a little rubber O-ringy on the bottom. We're just gonna stick that on the end of the hose, like so. And then on the end of all this, we're gonna stick our syringe. There. So this is what our little squirting syringe apparatus looks like. It's got our adapter on the end, the hose, and then if we need to, we can stop the flow of fluid by crimping it together like that. So that's technically 4 pieces, but really just 1 piece. So you need this majiggy all put together, the 2 tools to take out the screws, bucket to hold extra fluid, and then the fluid. So let's get started. All right, so now that we have all of our tools picked out, we need to remove this screw on the brake lever. This is our bleed screw on the brake lever. So if you unscrew this screw and you unscrew the screw at the bottom, down at the caliper where I was showing you earlier, that's the 2 entry and exit points for the fluid. That's the only way they can escape this system is through this hole or through the hole down on the brake caliper. Before I remove the screw, I should tell you, ideally, you want this to be as horizontal as possible so that when we pump fluid in, there's no air sitting up here in the reservoir. I've tilted the scooter as far as I can get it to the side without a second person, so this is gonna have to do for me, but in an ideal world, this is totally horizontal, FYI. So when you remove this screw, there is a little washer or an O-ring in here that you be very careful not to lose. So I have a little screw here, and then on the very end of it, there's a little O-ring. Do not lose that. That's what's creating the seal between the two metal components. So I'm gonna set this aside. So if you unscrew this and you see hydraulic oil come bubbling out of here, but your brakes are still squishy and you know they're squishy, that means you have a bubble of air somewhere in the line in between here and the caliper. This being full of oil is a good thing, but air bubbles can still get trapped in the line in the curves and bends. But if it comes bubbling out of here, don't worry. Just sop it up with a paper towel and quickly take your little bucket apparatus with the plunger. Make sure the plunger is pushed into the bottom of the bucket, create a nice little seal like that. And then you want to screw the bucket into the threads on the brake caliper, just like this. And like I said before, when I was putting this together, you got to be careful to have this O-ring. This O-ring acts like the same O-ring we just took off. It's the only way to create a little seal in between this piece of plastic and metal here. All right, so my little bucket is in there pretty tight. Don't over tighten it or you'll break that little O-ring. In an ideal world, this bucket would be perfectly up and down, like I said earlier. Like if I could tilt the scooter over like this. Okay, and tilt it a little farther, we'll use that. Again, make sure you have your little plunger in here. And once you get your bucket screwed in, let's go down to the bottom of the caliper. Okay, so here's our brake caliper. This is our bleed screw on the caliper right there. This is a zoom brake that's turned vertically. Normally they're mounted horizontally, so your bleed screw might be on the front of your brakes. But either way, this is the line that's currently full of hydraulic fluid. We need to remove this bleed screw, but if we did that without that bucket up top, then the oil would just come pouring out of this hole. So make sure that bucket is clogged up top. And also, we have two options right now. We can either stuff paper towels all around this brake caliper and hope that in the process of our brake bleed, we don't get any oil on the brake pads or brake rotor, or we can do it the proper way and actually remove the caliper from the scooter so it's sitting over here and work on it separately. That way, if we get oil all over it, we can just clean it off before we install it. That's the proper way to do it. That's how I'm gonna do it because this is an instructional video. So the screws to remove our brake caliper are here, and then one on the bottom. It's a size 5 Allen wrench. Just sticking it in the hole and unscrewing. It's got the little rounded bit on the end, so I don't have to stick it in perfectly straight. I can have it at an angle and still unscrew it. Love these things. Okay, second screw out. Got both screws out. This just slides right off. Ta-da! So with the caliper removed, this is what it looks like. You can see our brake pads are stuffed right in there, and this bit right here is our bleed port. Very important. Not bleeding like violence, YouTube. Jeez. Am I gonna have to bleep that? I'm not gonna bleep that. They're gonna demonetize the video though, so please subscribe. Okay, so for this next part, you are going to want some pliers, and we're gonna remove the brake pads. See this little piece right here, how it's bent down? I need to straighten that out. Just gonna grip it with my pliers, straighten it out best I can. Now we're just gonna grab this end with our pliers and pull that out, just like that. And once we've done that, our brake pads will come out of the caliper, like so. Okay, so with the brake pads removed, our caliper now looks like this. And we want to be careful when we're working on the brakes that we don't squeeze the brake caliper and push these pistons on either side of the caliper inwards, because they're hard to get out without pads in there. So that's where this comes in. This is a brake block that comes with the kit, and I've just wrapped some tape around it to make it a little thicker, because the brake pads I just took out of there were brand new and our pistons are pushed all the way back. So we're shoving this block inside the caliper just to prevent the pistons from closing while we're working on the scooter. Okay, so we got that shoved right in there, and that's just holding the two pistons apart inside the caliper. The next step is to remove this little bleed screw from our caliper, and since we have our bucket up there, hopefully once I take this screw out, it won't pour oil, but I do expect some to still leak out. Got our little hose piece crimped like this, and once we screw that into the hole, that should plug it up. So I'm gonna take my little size 15 hex key that came with the brake kit, unscrew the bleed screw here. So taking the screw out, putting my syringe piece in, screwing it in as fast as I can. So with my hose attached like this is screwed into the bleed port of the caliper. Put on my little crimping device. Now the hose is crimped and the oil can't come out of the hose right here. But the next step is to take this syringe, fill it up full of mineral oil, and pop it on the end of your hose. All right, so here's our syringe full of mineral oil. It's worth noting that most of the time brake kits do not come with mineral oil. It's like a $10 extra that you have to buy. But if you buy the brake kit from PEV Outlet, there is a combination pack that you can buy. You can select mineral oil and the brake kit at the same time and you'll get a little discount. So here's our caliper with the tube sticking out. We're just gonna stick our hose right on the top there, like so. So now what's gonna happen is we're gonna take off our clamp. Well, you can't really take it off, but you can unclamp it. Okay, so what's gonna happen now, I'm gonna take the little plunger piece out of my bucket that's upstairs on the brake lever. And then once that plunger is out, I'm gonna push the plunger down on this syringe and we're gonna push all of this hydraulic fluid down into the intake port on the caliper. And that's just gonna be pushing hydraulic fluid in here and then up the line. And any bubbles that might be in here or in the lines along the way up to the top of the lever are all gonna get pushed out into that little bucket up top. Now that I have my plunger out from upstairs, I'm gonna push all this oil into my lines. And if you look up top, which I can't show you right now, you'll actually see oil filling up the bucket upstairs that's hooked up to the lever. And you wanna make sure when you're pushing all this fluid in from this syringe that you're not overfilling the bucket. So periodically check on that. So I just pushed most of this syringe full of hydraulic fluid in there, and there's no oil up in the bucket up there. So that means we had at least this much air in our lines. That's crazy. Let's keep going. All right, now you can see we're just about to start pushing air into the line, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to crimp my hose again with this little tool, pull the syringe off, and then go up to the bucket that's up there, which should have some oil in it now, and I'm going to refill this syringe out of the bucket. All right, second syringe full of oil. Let's go ahead and pop it on, and we're going to remove the clamp. We're going to start injecting our second syringe full of oil in here. So what this is doing is just pushing fluid through the whole system and then out the top, and pushing any air bubbles you might have in the system along the way. And this is what you want to do if your brakes are squishy. If your brakes aren't leaking and your brake pads look good, but they're still squishy, this is what you need to be doing. You have air bubbles in your line and you need to be pushing fluid in there. Sometimes that even happens from the factory. You want to keep repeating over and over. You just want to suck it out of the bucket, fill the syringe, pump it back in through the caliper, and just keep pushing it over and over in a big circular loop. And eventually you'll push all the bubbles out of your line. So gonna be my last one. I've sucked it out of the bucket, pushed it through the caliper about 4 or 5 times now. And I feel like that's probably pretty good to push out all the bubbles. So we are going to clamp this off, take our syringe, and the next step is to remove the bucket from upstairs and then put the screw back into the brake caliper, which I can't do that with this camera. So I'm gonna use the GoPro strapped to my head because obvious reasons. Oh, by the way, you should use gloves when you're doing this. Mineral oil is not supposed to get on your hands, but yeah, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so sucking all of the oil out of my bucket here. This is our remaining oil, and what I usually do with that is put it in here. Now you should never reuse this. Ideally, you shouldn't anyways, but I keep mine just in case, you know, I ever get into a situation where I need to bleed brakes and I don't have a kit on me. It's just nice to have some spare oils laying around. Okay, so I'm gonna remove the bucket and then quickly put this screw back in. And you can see as I unscrew the bucket, we got fluid coming out because we are chock full now. Plug the hole quick. All right, our hole is plugged. That's what she said. Okay. Now that we have the top all plugged up, we have got to disconnect our little hose here and put in the screw back into the bleed port on the caliper. Now, in order to not introduce any more air into the system and leak any fluid out that might be coming out of here, I'm gonna raise the height of the caliper up off the ground a little bit to try and help get a little gravity assist going here. So I'm gonna unscrew this quickly, and we are gonna quickly put it in our screw right here. Now that screw you want to be sure is pretty tight. If not, we're just going to have fluid leaking out of there. Okay, so our system is all sealed up. I've got the screw back in here. I've got the screw back in top. Now, if you'd like, with the chuck still in here, you can squeeze the brake lever. If you squeeze it and it just feels locked, then you know you're pretty solid. You're full of brake fluid. So let's go check. Moment of truth here. Oh yeah, nice. That feels like new. Squeeze the brake lever really hard and make sure that no oil is coming out of this joint that we messed with or out of our bleed port screw up here. Squeezing hard. Nothing leaking out of here. We are in business, nothing leaking out of here. Let's go, baby. Brakes are fixed on the GTR. Just gotta put all the stuff back on the handlebars and remount the brake caliper and we're done. Okay, so next step is to clean all the oil off of this, or as much as you can. Clean your hands, clean the oil off of this, and get those brake pads back in here. You're gonna need like 50 paper towels to get all the mineral oil off this. It is seriously really hard to get off. Okay, anyway. All right, so I cleaned off as much oil as I could off of here. I put the brakes back in, just pop them in the same way you took them out, reverse process. Make sure you put the pin back in and bend it. And if you want, you can use your little brake block here. See how it's wedged on the bottom like this? If one of your pistons is pushing one of your brake pads in towards the middle, like if this one's pushed in this way, or this one's pushed in the middle this way, you can just stick this wedge in there and just wedge it in as hard as you can. And that should push the piston back into place. There. So now we're all set. Of course, when you do that, you want to make sure you don't have any brake oil left on this thing. Wipe that off. This just slides right back on the same place we took it off. We're going to take the 2 big screws that we took out, just put them right back in. Now, if you're lucky, your brake pads won't squeak on the rotor when you put it back together. But more than likely, your brake pads are going to be squeaking along this new rotor because it's not adjusted in the same position as it was before. So if you need to know how to make your brakes not squeak, I did another video on that. I'll link it above now. But as far as I'm concerned for this project, this caliper is now remounted. We want to make sure these are nice and tight. If you're comfortable with it, you can put some blue Loctite on these 2 things. Not too much, but it'll help keep your caliper centered on the disc brake so that it won't scrape in the future. All right, now we're back up top here. We confirmed this is not leaking. You can squeeze the lever and no fluid comes out of here, no fluid comes out of here. Good to go. So we're gonna slide our boot back on to complete the brake repair process. There we go. Got to reconnect our brake connectors and reconnect our throttle, tighten those 2 back up and put our grip back on it and we'll be good to go. Let's reconnect our wires. So this is our throttle, orange goes into orange. Very easy. Reconnect our brakes. I guess this is more orange. The other one might have been yellow. I like it's cool. The connectors have little arrows on them so you can see which piece lines up with which. We're gonna slide our handlebar back on here, just like so. There we go. Flush with the end of the bar. Okay, gonna use our size 4 to tighten up the brakes. Now beware, when you're tightening the screws into the end of the handlebars like this gold metal that goes around the end of the bar is not that strong. It's a very cast aluminum, so don't tighten these too tight or you'll strip the hole that goes into the other end of the grip, and then you won't be able to tighten your grip down, and that's a sad day. And you want to stick the little plug piece on the end, and you can only take these on and off a few times before the plastic just breaks off and you have to buy a new one. I'm not going to click that in all the way yet, in case I need to undo it later. Clean off as much oil up here as I can. Cinch up this throttle and we will be done. Money! There we go. That's a completed brake. That has such a nice bite to it. I love that. There's nothing like that clean brake bite when it's brand new. Ooh, makes me want to do the rear. Anyway, not gonna do that today. I found the culprit. This little olive right here. Remember the olive we put up top that was perfectly round? This is the olive I pulled off and it is an oval. So that's why it wasn't seating in there properly. That's what happened when it pulled out, but the damaged olive was the culprit. All right, you guys, we've done it. There's officially a video on the internet, check, of a brake bleed on an electric scooter. And we have such a clean bite on these levers now. I'm so excited to ride this thing. Just holding on to this thing makes me want to ride. But if you learned something, please subscribe to the channel. That really would mean a lot to me. 50K subscribers by Christmas. But if you want to buy anything that I used in the video, like the tools, the brake bleed kit, or the oil, or even this light, you can check those out at pevoutlet.com. If you want to grab yourself a Wolf King, which I highly recommend you do, it's an amazing scooter, go over to Voro Motors website and use the code Ginger on Wheels, you get 50 bucks off. I'll put links to everything that I used, including the scooter, in the description. Let's just charge this thing up and go for a ride, okay? I'll see you for the next video.